Logan Price had driven through countless nights without fear, until the one where the road refused to end. It began like any other haul across the desert, but when his radio started whispering his name and the highway looped back on itself, Logan realized he wasn't just lost. Something out there was waiting for him in the dark, matching his every mile, breathing in rhythm with his truck's engine, and it wanted to ride with him. The road stretched endlessly before me, a black ribbon cutting through the middle of nowhere. My name's Aaron, and I've been a long-haul trucker for most of my adult life. You get used to the loneliness out here, the hum of the tires, the faint vibration of the steering wheel, the way the night swallows everything beyond the reach of your headlights. But that night felt different from the start. The air was too still, too cold for the desert, and the stars above looked dim, like they were watching instead of shining. It was just past 2 in the morning when the first strange thing happened. My radio came to life on its own. Not music, not a station, just a low, pulsing static. It rose and fell like breathing, soft at first, then louder, until it sounded like a whisper pressed against my ear. I tried turning it off, but it wouldn't respond. The noise just kept going, following the rhythm of my heartbeat. Out here, with no cars for miles and nothing but the desert around me, even small sounds start to feel enormous. The stretch of highway I was on had no lights, no gas stations, no exits for at least 50 miles. I'd driven this route before, but something about it felt wrong this time, like the road itself was longer than it should have been. The asphalt shimmered faintly in my headlights, and the horizon refused to move closer no matter how fast I drove. I rolled down the window for a bit of air, but the wind that came through was icy, unnatural for a Nevada night. It made me shiver, even with the heater running. That's when I saw it. A shape standing in the middle of the road ahead, tall and motionless, its outline barely visible against the dark. I slammed the brakes, and the truck lurched, the tires screaming against the pavement. My heart pounded as the headlights framed it, just for a second, and then it was gone. The road ahead was empty, as if there'd never been anything there at all. I sat there for a long moment, staring into the blackness. The radio hissed softly, almost like it was breathing again. I checked my mirrors. Nothing. My hands were trembling as I reached for my coffee, but before I could lift it, something smeared across the windshield. A pale handprint, large, wet, and pressed from the outside. I froze, staring at the dripping outline as it slowly faded. My truck was still idling, the low rumble filling the cab like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. I leaned forward, scanning the road, but the night beyond my headlights looked bottomless. I told myself it was condensation or maybe an oil smear, something logical, but the air was too dry and the print was too clear. 5 long fingers, each leaving behind a streak that glistened under the lights. The radio crackled again, louder this time, and for just a second I thought I heard it whisper my name. That was when I realized I wasn't alone out there. Not on that road. Not anymore. I sat in the cab for a long time, staring at that faint smear on the glass, my breath fogging the inside of the windshield. The desert night pressed against the truck like a heavy blanket, so quiet that every creak of metal and groan of the engine felt too loud. I finally forced myself to open the door, stepping down into the gravel shoulder with my flashlight in hand. The cold hit me hard, sharp and biting, the kind that sinks into your bones. I aimed the beam at the ground and froze. Footprints. Bare ones. They led from the middle of the road straight to the front of my truck. The sand around the prints was undisturbed. No tire marks, no sign of another vehicle, just those footprints. They were wrong somehow. Long, uneven, like whoever made them wasn't walking normally. The last one stopped right at the bumper where the handprint had been. I lifted the light toward the dark highway ahead, but it only reached a few feet before fading into endless black. There was no one out there. Nothing moved, not even the wind. I climbed back into the cab, locked the doors, and gripped the steering wheel. My hands were still shaking. I started driving again, trying to convince myself that I was just tired, that my mind was playing tricks after too many hours on the road. The radio hissed softly, and the hum of the tires almost lulled me into calm. But every few minutes, the static would spike, like a breath catching in someone's throat. And sometimes, beneath it, I could swear I heard my name. By the time I reached the next rest stop, I needed to get out, stretch, and shake the fear off. The lot was empty, not a single car or truck in sight. The fluorescent lights above flickered weakly, painting everything in pale, sickly white. I pulled out my logbook to check my driving hours. 8 hours straight, according to my watch. But the clock on the dashboard said 2. My GPS showed me somewhere in New Mexico, even though I hadn't crossed any state line. The map blinked and then went black. I stepped outside again, rubbing my eyes, trying to breathe. That's when I noticed the air around me had changed. It wasn't cold anymore. It was dead still, heavy and stale, like the air in a sealed room. The flickering light above the restroom buzzed once, then died completely. For a moment, everything went pitch dark. And then the light came back on, just for a second, and I saw something standing across the lot. A tall, thin shape, motionless under the weak glow. I blinked, and the light went out again. When it flickered back, the shape was gone. But the reflection in my side mirror made my blood run cold. It wasn't gone. It was standing right beside my truck, inches from the door, its outline pressed against the metal, waiting. I didn't look directly at it. My hands fumbled with the door handle as my pulse hammered in my ears. I slammed the lock down and hit the gas pedal, tires squealing against the gravel as I tore out of the rest stop. The trailer jolted behind me, but I didn't care. All I wanted was distance, miles between me and whatever that thing was. The headlights cut through the dark, but the farther I drove, the more I felt like I wasn't going anywhere at all. The same road signs started to appear again and again. Exit 14, gas and diner. Then 20 minutes later, the same sign. And again. It made no sense. I hadn't turned once, hadn't slowed down, hadn't seen a single crossroad. I started counting the mile markers, but they didn't change either. The same number, over and over. I tried the radio again, maybe to hear a human voice, something to ground me. But what came through was worse than silence. The static was back, whispering like before, but now it had rhythm, an uneven pattern that almost sounded like breathing right behind me. The sound filled the cab, like someone was sitting in the passenger seat exhaling softly into my ear. I turned my head slowly. The seat was empty, but the cushion looked slightly indented, as if someone had just been sitting there. I focused back on the road. My knuckles were white around the wheel. Then came the sound I dreaded most, a dull thud from the trailer. Just one, but heavy enough to shake the whole rig. I froze, my foot hovering over the gas. Then another thud. Then 3. Each one louder than the last, pounding like fists against metal. I turned the volume up, but the radio only grew louder too. Static swirling, voices overlapping like a crowd whispering all at once. My breath came in short bursts. The pounding stopped suddenly, replaced by a scraping noise that ran along the side of the truck, slow and deliberate. It started at the back and crept toward the cab, metal grinding against metal. I gritted my teeth and kept driving. The scraping moved overhead now, above me, like something was crawling across the roof. I glanced up through the windshield just as something slid into view. Pale skin stretched over a face pressed upside down against the glass. Hollow eyes. No mouth. Just a smooth, blank surface where a mouth should have been. It stayed there for only a second, but I saw the faint outline of its ribs moving, expanding and collapsing like it was breathing through the glass. Then it was gone, slipping out of sight with a sound like tearing paper. I slammed on the brakes, the truck shuddering to a stop. My breathing came in gasps. I waited, listening, but the night was silent again. Then I felt it. A faint vibration under my seat, like something shifting inside the floorboards. The truck engine was off, but I could hear a low hum, steady and alive, pulsing from somewhere deep within the metal. The silence after the hum stopped was unbearable. It wasn't real silence. More like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to move. I sat frozen in the driver's seat, listening to the faint tick of the cooling engine. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, but I forced myself to open the door and step out. The cold hit me again, sharper this time, mixed with the faint smell of rust and something sweet, like decaying fruit. Gravel crunched under my boots as I circled the truck with my flashlight. The beam cut through the dark, revealing nothing but dust and emptiness. The highway stretched on in both directions, endless and still. When I reached the back of the trailer, I hesitated. My instincts screamed at me not to open it. I'd hauled this load from California, sealed electronics crates, each one bolted shut. But after the pounding and scraping I'd heard, I needed to know. I unlatched the doors and pulled them open. The smell hit me first. Burnt plastic and something else, something organic. My flashlight trembled in my hand as the beam slid across the cargo space. Every crate was split open, torn apart from the inside. Pieces of metal and shattered screens littered the floor. Cables hung from the ceiling like vines. In the center of the trailer, something had been dragged through the dust, leaving a long smear that vanished into the shadows. I stepped closer, crouching to inspect the marks. They weren't tire tracks or scuff marks. They looked like claw marks, deep grooves carved into the metal floor. I reached out to touch one, and my fingers came away black and sticky. It wasn't oil. It was thicker, almost tar-like. As I backed away, my boot hit something soft. I turned the light and froze. It was a shoe. My shoe. The same brand, same scuffed toe, even the same tear near the heel. But I was wearing both of mine. My stomach tightened as I stared at it, a dark stain spreading across the fabric. I couldn't look away. The beam from my flashlight flickered across the side of the truck, catching my reflection in the chrome fuel tank. But something was wrong. My reflection wasn't copying me. It was smiling, even though my own face was blank with terror. Slowly, deliberately, it raised a finger and pointed behind me. I spun around, the flashlight cutting through the dark. Nothing. Just the endless desert, stretching silent and empty. I turned back toward the reflection, but now it was gone. My own face looked back at me again, pale and trembling. I took a step closer, trying to steady my breathing. Then faintly, the reflection's lips began to move, even though mine didn't. No sound came out, just the slow shape of words forming over and over again. It was mouthing my name. Then, from the open trailer behind me, something answered in a whisper that wasn't mine at all. I didn't turn right away. I stood there listening to the whisper fade into the night air, my flashlight trembling in my grip. It came from the trailer, but when I aimed the light inside again, there was only the wreckage of broken crates and the long black smear disappearing into the dark. The beam couldn't reach the end of it anymore. It was as if the inside of the trailer had stretched, deepened somehow. A space that should have been 20 feet long now looked endless. I wanted to leave. Every part of me screamed to get back in the truck and drive until the sun came up. But the keys were gone. I had left them in the ignition, and now the cab was dark, the faint glow of the dashboard lights dead. I walked back slowly, scanning the ground, feeling like the air around me was thicker than before, like I was moving underwater. When I reached the driver's side door, I stopped. The glass was fogged from the inside. A handprint appeared slowly against it, pressing outward, the same pale shape I'd seen on the windshield before. I stepped back, heart pounding so hard it hurt. Then the truck engine roared to life on its own. The headlights flared, flooding the road ahead with blinding white light. For a few seconds, I just stared. The road that had been empty before now had a sign standing in the middle of it. A plain metal sign with one word in faded red paint, "Return." I blinked, and another appeared further down the road. "Return." Another, and another. Each time my eyes moved, another sign flickered into view, closer and closer, forming a path of rusted warnings that vanished into the dark horizon. I climbed into the cab, shaking, desperate for some kind of sense. The radio was on again, whispering softly. At first it was only static, then a voice emerged through the crackling noise. My own voice, calm, steady, but not mine. It told me to stop fighting, to open the trailer, to go inside. I gripped the wheel and pressed the gas, but the truck didn't move. The pedal was useless. The engine idled, rumbling like it was breathing. The voice on the radio kept talking, clearer now. It told me I'd already opened the trailer. It told me I was already inside. I turned off the radio, but the sound didn't stop. It was coming from everywhere, echoing through the cab, vibrating through the floor. My reflection in the windshield smiled at me again, faint and distant, and then it leaned closer, pressing its forehead against the glass. I turned toward the back, and the trailer doors were open again, swinging slowly in the cold wind. Darkness poured from it. Not the kind that hides things, but the kind that seems alive. I stepped down from the cab, drawn forward despite every instinct screaming no. The air was colder now, thick and heavy. I reached the edge and looked in. Inside was only darkness, but from deep within it came the soft hum of an engine. My heartbeat. I leaned closer, trying to see. The whisper came again, right by my ear this time. You never left. And then the truck's headlights went out, leaving me in complete darkness as the engine behind me began to breathe.